Jane and Robin devote that month to Shabbat, and by the way,
that's a really easy lemon pie for Shabbat, and that's a good recipe. And then we have a whole, and of course each holiday has a full menu, and then we'll go down to Thanksgiving. Is it next
yeah,
year?
and to Thanksgiving. So there's a whole menu for Thanksgiving.
Yes, and I did because I couldn't leave, that's an American holiday, but I couldn't leave that out because it's everybody's favorite holiday. Of course, we celebrate fruits and nuts and things that grow on trees, and these are little fun candies that you can make either for Tu B'Shvat, or sometimes we make them for Thanksgiving. They're fun. They have like a little hazelnut inside, or you can make them without nuts if you're allergic to nuts. And chocolate grows on trees, so we have to include chocolate. And this is a great family heirloom marble cake, which you can either make fancy like this in a 10-inch spring form, or if you want to do it like for a picnic, you can just do it in a 9x13 cake pan and ice it and cut it into squares. It's a really good recipe. Purim, of course, I love this. This is a beautiful rendition by Robin with the Shalak Mana. Whoops, go back. I wanted to show that one again. And yeah, the family bringing the gifts of the hamantaschen and the apples to each other, and the costume. That's a beauty. I love that one. And of course, there's the chocolate mousse. Very, very easy blender chocolate mousse. It has a little cognac in it, and you're allowed to tipple. You're supposed to tipple on Purim, so it's a good time to have a little cognac in there. And I use cookie dough. I'm not a yeast hamantaschen. Some people might be, but it's got to be butter and sugar all the way for me. So I do a cookie dough recipe for the hamantaschen. And of course, I love this. I love Robin's. He's trouble, this kid. He's always in trouble. Yeah. He's stealing the afikomen before he's supposed to.
Yeah. My kids spend a lot of time under the table. I think most people have had that experience where they have kids under the table during Passover.
And again, you saw this already, the glazed grapes and the Passover chocolate chicken. I've got a whole Passover menu. And then we go into ER with all the I holidays, Israel Independence Day. This is Lag Bomer. I don't know if they still do potato sack races, do they? I mean, I remember this from my childhood. This was like my favorite thing. So we had to have a potato sack race. And I try to be seasonal. At this time of the year is when you get rhubarb, which is in early spring. So a lot of people will make rhubarb for their Seder, or afterwards in ER, the rhubarb. I had to do this photograph in the dead of winter when there was no rhubarb. So I ended up, fortunately, Publix in Florida, where my mother is, had frozen rhubarb. Otherwise, I was going to, how was I going to photograph? I was thinking I'm going to have to take celery and color it red or something. But I ended up, Publix had some really good frozen rhubarb, so I used that. But you know, rhubarb is usually only available for a couple months in the spring. It's a spring vegetable, so a spring fruit or vegetable, whatever it is. So that is Israel Independence Day. And of course, Shavuot with dairy for the blintzes. If you want to make, from scratch blintzes. I used to be, before I went into medicine, I was a teacher. And I taught junior high school and high school French for several years before we moved to Louisville, and then I decided to go to medical school. That was a dream that I hadn't quite decided to do, but when I came to Louisville it became a possibility. But anyway, this crepe recipe I was given by two of my students when we had a French dinner. We created a French dinner, and everybody brought a recipe, and they brought in this incredible recipe for crepes, and I use that. It's very easy and it's very good, and I use that when I make blintzes, so it's a really good recipe. And I'll make one more little bit about that later. And then finally, and this is I think what Robin was talking about, our 9-year-old is becoming a little more contemplative in this one with his grandfather. And of course this is some of the summer months when we have the other full fast day of Tisha B'Av, which commemorating the destruction of the first temple. And during that period of time, meat is not usually eaten. So I go ahead and have a dairy menu for Av. And this is one of my very all-time favorite recipes. It's a coconut cream pie from Marty's sister Barbara, and it's a good one. It's a more challenging recipe because you have to make a custard and you don't want to scramble the eggs and all that. But it's a really good one. So so each holiday does have a menu. I do say in the beginning of the book, being a full-time working person, I mean, I can make challah, I've made challah, but I don't have a challah recipe. I do buy gefilte fish, but a lot of, most of the other things, the recipes are in the book. And I do, as I'll talk about upstairs, I do try to do things ahead of time and do things on different days. I mean, I'll shop one day, like for the rugel, I'll make the dough one day, I'll make the filling one day. And that way I can do these nice recipes, but I don't have to do them all at once. So this is my Sukkot luncheon recipe. And this is a letter. When I finished the book, I tried to send every one of my contributors a copy of the book. So I tracked down Derek Niederman and Jack Eklund. Those were my two students, my two ninth graders that gave me the crepe recipe. I had a lot of trouble finding Jack, but I finally tracked him down. He lives in Washington State. And it was very poignant because he said, "Thank you for sending me a copy of your new cookbook. I brought back many memories to see the crepe recipe again. My mother," this is what really killed me, "my mother passed away not many years after the French dinner." So that would have made him like a late teenager. He would have been very young. You mentioned the French dinner that you mentioned. Unfortunately, one of the things that got lost was her box of recipes, which included the crepe recipe. It means much more to me than you can imagine to find it again. So collecting recipes and passing them down, it's important. That was the whole thing about this book, to take things that I loved and pass them on. So I would like to thank these amazing people. I do not know how I did this because I was a complete novice as far as writing a book. I happened to be just luck into some amazing people. Of course, Marshall, you know, Marty. And Robin is an amazing person to work with. She is easy, she is cooperative, she is incredibly creative. I'm very lucky to have worked with her. Megan Clark is a graphic designer who laid out the book, I think, just fabulous. We did the whole thing on email. I have never met her. She lives in Vancouver, Washington. And my daughter Julie, who went to the graduated University of Oregon, suggested through several people, and that's how I found Megan. Bill Nyberg is our ophthalmic photographer at Penn, and Kathleen Wilson was one of my executive secretaries at Temple University, and she helped me. And of course, I have already acknowledged Amy, who helped me. So I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Demonstrate.
Very good.
And we'll take some questions, or we can take questions upstairs. I mean, we should just kind of go upstairs and... I
Demonstrate.
do want to do a demo on the rug.